Venezuela thinks it's too dangerous to come here. They're worried about our gun violence. And I bring that up because currently the US State Department, just a couple of weeks ago, issued a worldwide caution. They said, don't travel anywhere. The world is too dangerous. To me, that's just mind-boggling. Yes, listen to the US State Department. Yes, go to their website, read their cautions, but understand that the rest of the world is terrified to come here. Take what they say with a grain of salt. Okay, back to one of the biggest trends in travel for people who want to get off the beaten path, and that is expedition cruises. There's been this boom in expedition cruising, going to places that you could never get to independently. I'm talking not just Antarctica and the Galapagos Island, but the west coast of Africa, or the coast of Indonesia, or Borneo. There are so many really, really interesting destinations that expedition cruising is covering. Now, it used to be if you took an expedition cruise, you would be probably sleeping in a bunk bed and eating very, very simple meals and still paying a pretty penny for it. But a lot of the big names have gotten into this, and it's much less, it's not less expensive, but it's much more cushy than it used to be. So this is the Viking expedition cruise, and on board they have incredible toys like this. This is a submarine that their guests can take, and yes, because it's yellow, it's named Ringo. So really, really interesting, if very pricey, options in expedition cruising. Another thing you have to remember is, for centuries, it was the rivers that knit together continents. And so by taking a river cruise, you often can very easily see the top sites in different parts of the world. But you have to be careful that you get the right river cruise. Yes, unlike ocean-going cruises, they're truly all-inclusive. All of your meals are included. You get sightseeing tours each day. The dirty little secret about river cruises is, with the exception of Tauk and Grand Circle, all of the river cruises share the same guides on shore. So you could be paying $800 a night for a Uniworld cruise and get the same shore excursion as somebody paying, I don't know, $250 a night on Emerald gets. So know that. As well, you have to make sure that it's the demographic that you want to be traveling with. About 14 years ago, my father, when he was 80, he took a river cruise on the Danube, which we always say is the best of the rivers because it's the most varied. On many river cruises, you get up and you go to the cathedral, and then you see a castle, and then the next day it's the cathedral and the castle, and the next day it's the cathedral and the castle. Whereas on the Danube, you're seeing Art Deco, you're seeing wineries, you're seeing the cathedrals and the castles, but it's much more varied. So anyway, 80 years old, came back, said the food was incredible, we saw such beautiful sights, and I was the youngest person on the boat. So this is an activity, as is expedition cruising, quite frankly, that if you're under 60, you may feel out of place. Not really, it all has to depend on your mindset, but know that you will be traveling pretty much only with older people. The way to get around that and still do a river cruise is to do something my family and I did this year. We rented our own boat. We did it through Le Boat, but there are many companies that do it, and we did a trip where we drove the boat ourselves, never having driven boats before, on the Canal de Midi, which was a canal created by Louis XIV. Here's our little group. That's my daughters and me in the middle. We each brought a friend. I brought a friend from college. My daughter brought her boyfriend, and my other daughter brought her good friend. And we had this little floating home. I mean, here's the deck, every bedroom, simple bedrooms, but they had their own bathrooms. Here's the kitchen, another thing of the kitchen. We were in this incredibly historic region of France where they had these fortified cities, mostly because the Pope kept attacking them. That's a really fascinating bit of history. Pope sent crusades into France, believe it or not. You learn all about that. And we went on this historic canal under these crazy bridges. That may not look like a crazy bridge. Here's what it looks like to go under it. Every bridge was incredibly low. Here's another scene. And so my dear friend Kara from college, we were under a bridge once. She forgot we were under a bridge and she looked up. She had a big black eye for the whole tour. We had to go into locks. One person had to be on the shore tying up the boat so it didn't ping pong around. And we had to act as a team. We had to figure out how to create an itinerary on a boat after we were given a 1-hour lesson, mostly in French, by a guy, how to do this together. And it was a life-changing experience for me and my family because, you know, you bring up kids, suddenly they're in their 20s and they become teammates. It reminded me of something Rolf Potts said, a wonderful travel writer, has a new book out called The Way of Vagabonding. He says, oftentimes the most essential thing you learn on the road isn't a skill so much as adaptive savvy instincts like time management, goal setting, negotiation, networking, cultural awareness that arise along the way. Moreover, since travel to distant places allows you to risk failure in a setting where nobody you know will see your mistakes, it emboldens you to learn in a more vulnerable way. It was so wonderful to be learning with my daughters how to drive this boat, how all about the area. It really was an extraordinary vacation, mostly because it was a hell of a lot of work. I didn't realize it would be so much work when we signed up for it. So we also had travel insurance for this because my 20-year-old one day went showboating, and even though this thing wasn't supposed to go more than 6 miles an hour, she got it up to 15 and rammed it into a bank right in front of a cafe full of French people who, upon hearing our English accents, our American accents, just went crazy with laughter. Thank God we had travel insurance. You need travel insurance these days to travel. You never need it just for a flight. That's money flushed down the toilet. You can always get credit on a flight nowadays and get that money back. But you do need it if you're gonna have a boat, or if you're gonna rent a house, or if you're gonna go on a cruise or do a big tour. I like cancel for any reason insurance, and I'll give you a reason why. Say the destination you were going to, suddenly a new strand of COVID raised its ugly head, but they didn't shut down, people were still going there, but you decided you didn't want to go. If you cancel with a regular travel insurance policy, you won't be covered because that would be considered fear of travel. So you need a CFAR policy so you can cancel for any reason. Now they're more expensive and they only cover 75% of your costs, but I think they're smart to get. If you're going somewhere very, very exotic, get medical evacuation insurance. The daughter who rammed the boat into the side, she was in Uganda this summer. That's a long story. And she broke her ankle and had to be medically evacuated out. If we hadn't had that insurance, that would have been a $60,000 cost. I mean, and that's not any kind of hyperbole. And pandemics are now covered. So how do you find the right insurance? I like these marketplace sites. What you do is you go to them, you put in the dates of your trip, the details of your trip, and your age, and they shoot back 50, 60, 100 different policies And inevitably, the most expensive policy covers the least amount of things. I don't know why that is. Usually the best policy is somewhere in the middle. The key thing is never ever buy travel insurance from the travel company you're going with. Why is that? Well, if they go belly up, you've lost your insurance too. The people who booked with Thomas Cook, a company that had been in business for close to 100 years, but went belly up during the pandemic, they all lost their insurance. So get it directly from the insurance companies. Okay, let's talk about tours. How do you find a tour? I like these two marketplace sites. They're not perfect. They don't cover every tour out there, but the good thing about them is you can do a search on them and get a better idea for how much you should be paying. So here is a search on Tour Radar. It's for the Amalfi Coast. The first one is from Nat Geo Tours. It's $660 a day, but you're getting all kinds of special experience because you have archaeologists who are traveling with you, you have historians, etc. The second tour, same amount of time, it is $167 a day, and the third tour is $175 a day. Interestingly, they're going pretty much the same places, vast change in prices, and people review these tours, and the lowest reviews are for Nat Geo, interestingly. So you can get a lay of the land. What I find with these tours, and often this is a good thing to do for safaris, is that if it's a local tour company, often they will have the exact same tour that the multinational ones do, but for much less money, because they have the inside track and less expenses. And that's the good thing about these marketplace sites. They'll introduce you to a lot of the local companies. All right, how do you choose the right tour? That is tricky, because a lot of what touring becomes is the interactions of the social group that forms when you're traveling, and inevitably there's one person you just wish you weren't vacationing with. Can you guarantee you won't have a tour like that? No, of course not. But different tour companies will have different demographics. So if you go with, say, Globus or Cosmos or Rick Steves, you're mostly going to be with Americans in their 60s. Rick Steves, to his credit, does smaller size tours. If you go with Intrepid Travel or G Adventures or Joser, those are more multinational companies. I did an Intrepid tour to Morocco when my kids were younger. It was a family tour, so we were only traveling with other families. We traveled with one family from the Netherlands, another family from England, and a third family from down the block in New York City who we had never met before. But it became part of the trip, discovering Morocco together with people from different countries. It really was a great thing. You also want to find out what is included in the tour. Many tours give you a tour in the morning and then they say, you have the afternoon free, which sounds great, but often the tour in the morning is not why you're there. So the afternoon tour that they're going to try to upsell you, say in Rome, is the one to the Vatican. And who's going to go to Rome and not go to the Vatican? So be very careful about the inclusions. A lot of tours do not include food, and I think that's a good thing, because you'll eat better on the tours usually that don't include food, because tours that include food can only go to restaurants that the locals have abandoned because they can take 30 people at a time. So look at the inclusions when you choose, and look at the expertise of the guides. What are their backgrounds? Are they really the right person to be leading these tours? And be careful of tours that list a lot of shopping experiences. Often the guides get kickbacks. I did one once in China. We went to the Great Wall. We spent about 2 hours in the Pearl Factory and half an hour at the Great Wall because our guides were getting a kickback from the Pearl Factory.